3 months after the Orvac supernova, the galaxy was quiet. The void swarm was gone, erased from existence. The council had survived. But the cost of survival weighed heavy on everyone who remained. Deho stood in the council's memorial hall, looking at the wall of names. 15 billion from the Orvac system. Yunwu, Jion, Taijin. Thousands of council soldiers who'd learned to fight like humans and died using those skills. The list went on and on. We're dedicating this memorial today, Velmora said, joining him, to remember all who fell. We want to call them heroes. They weren't heroes, Deho said quietly. They were people who died because that was the price. Don't romanticize it. They didn't die for glory. They died because the math required it. Then what do we call them? Casualties. That's all soldiers ever are. Casualties we hope weren't wasted. The memorial ceremony was attended by billions across the council worlds, broadcast to every surviving system. Leaders gave speeches about sacrifice and honor. They talked about the brave defenders who'd saved civilization. They made it sound noble. Deho didn't attend. Neither did Minji or Dr. Sohi. They watched from a transport ship preparing to return to Earth. They'd done their job. It was time to go home. Do you think they understand? Minji asked. The council, I mean. What they became? No, Deho said. They'll tell themselves it was temporary. That they only did what was necessary during the crisis. Give them 10 years and they'll rewrite the history. Make it sound like they fought with honor. But we changed them, Dr. Sohi observed. They know how to be predators now. That knowledge doesn't go away, she was right. The council military had adopted human tactics completely. Their weapons were designed for maximum lethality, not honorable combat. Their strategies emphasized survival over principle. They'd learned that sometimes you sacrifice the few to save the many, and that mathematics matters more than morality in war. Velmora knew it too. In the weeks after the swarm's defeat, she'd watched her people celebrate their survival while refusing to acknowledge what they'd become. They'd won by becoming monsters. Now they had to live with that knowledge. She met with Daiho privately before the human team departed. I need to know something, she said. Was it worth it? Becoming what we became? Daiho was quiet for a long moment. That's the wrong question. It's not about worth. It's about whether you can live with what you did. Can you? I don't know, Velmora admitted. We saved ourselves by abandoning everything we claimed to value. Honor, dignity, the sanctity of life. We calculated acceptable losses and sacrificed billions. We used weapons that would have horrified us before the war. We became killers. Yes, Daiho agreed. You did. Welcome to survival. It's not pretty. It's not noble. But you're alive. That's something. How do you live with it? You've done this before. Made these choices. Daiho's expression was tired. You don't live with it. You just keep moving forward. You remember the people you couldn't save. You carry that weight, and you hope that maybe eventually it meant something. Does it mean something? Ask me again in 50 years when you've had time to build something with the survival you bought. Maybe then you'll know if the price was worth paying. The Earth transport departed the next day. Daiho, Minji, and Dr. Sohi returned home to a planet that would never know the full details of what they'd done. The mission was classified. There would be no medals, no public recognition. Just another black operation file in Earth's military archives. Minji visited Taijin's family to deliver his personal effects. His parents were elderly, kind people who'd raised a son they thought was a simple soldier. She couldn't tell them what he'd really done, how he'd stayed behind on a dying moon to kill millions of creatures and save billions of lives. She just told them he died bravely and it was over quickly. Some lies are merciful. Dr. Sohi destroyed all her research, the biological weapons, the genetic targeting systems, the viruses designed to corrupt hive minds. She burned every file and erased every backup. Some knowledge was too dangerous to preserve. She'd created those weapons because they were necessary. Now she made sure no one could use them again. Why destroy it? A military officer asked when he learned what she'd done. We might need those weapons someday. If you need them again, invent them again, so he replied. Let the next scientist carry that weight. I've carried it long enough. Daiho retired quietly. He bought a small house far from any city and spent his days doing simple work. Gardening, reading, trying to sleep without dreaming of the Orvac system burning. He didn't talk about the war. When people asked about his military service, he said he'd done logistics work. Nothing exciting, but he couldn't forget. The faces of people he'd condemned to death. The soldiers who'd followed his orders into suicide missions. Hyunwoo's last transmission. Taejin's laughter. Cheon's calm acceptance of death. The weight of command never lifts. You just get used to carrying it. 5 years passed. Then 10. The galaxy moved on. The council rebuilt, expanded, and prospered. They told stories about the war, how they'd fought bravely against an ancient evil and won. The stories got cleaner over time. The brutal tactics were softened. The sacrifices were romanticized. It became a tale of heroes, not monsters. But their military remembered. They still trained using human methods. They still designed weapons for maximum lethality. They still calculated acceptable losses and made cold decisions about who lived and who died. The knowledge of how to be predators had spread. Other alien civilizations learned from the Council's example. The galaxy had changed. Earth was noticed too. The Council kept their distance, polite but wary. They knew what humans were capable of. They'd called for heroes and received exterminators. That reputation spread. Other civilizations heard stories about the monsters from Earth who'd saved the Council by teaching them to be monsters too. Some saw it as a warning. Others saw it as an opportunity. If humanity could solve the Council's problem, maybe they could solve others. The invitations started coming. Requests for military consultation. Offers of trade in exchange for tactical training. Proposals for alliance. Earth's government debated how to respond. Some wanted to accept, to build relationships and gain influence. Others worried about spreading human warfare across the galaxy. What if they created something worse than the swarm? 15 years after the Orvac supernova, Daeho received a transmission on a secure military channel. It was encrypted with Council codes. The message was simple. New threat detected in the outer reaches. Unknown hostiles consuming frontier worlds. Requesting Earth military consultation. Will you answer? Daeho stared at the message for a long time. Then he deleted it. He was done. He'd paid his price. Let someone else carry that weight now. But as he lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, he wondered about the new threat. Wondered if it was like the swarm or something different. Wondered if the Council would handle it themselves or if they'd fall back into old habits and need rescuing again. Mostly, he wondered how long before someone picked the lock on humanity's cage. Because that's what Earth was now. A cage containing monsters that the galaxy knew how to summon. They'd proven that humans could solve problems that seemed unsolvable. But they'd also proven that human solutions came with a terrible price. The Council had survived the swarm by learning to be predators. Other civilizations were learning the same lesson. And somewhere in the dark between stars, new threats were always emerging. The universe was full of horrors. The galaxy had learned that Earth kept bigger monsters in reserve. Practical, efficient, brutal creatures who calculated acceptable losses and did whatever was necessary to survive. They'd proven it once. Everyone knew they could do it again. The question that haunted Daeho as he stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep, was simple. Should they? Because monsters are useful when you need something killed. But once you let them out, once you teach civilizations how to be predators, you can't put that knowledge back in the box. The galaxy had changed. The Council had changed. Earth's reputation had changed. They'd all become a little more monstrous, a little more willing to do the unthinkable, a little more comfortable with acceptable losses and brutal mathematics. Maybe that was evolution. Maybe that was corruption. Daeho didn't know. He was just a soldier who'd followed orders and made terrible choices because someone had to. He'd saved billions by sacrificing millions. He'd taught aliens how to abandon honor in favor of survival. He'd watched good people die and kept moving forward because the mission required it. Was it worth it? Villamora had asked. Daeho still didn't have an answer. The swarm was gone. The Council survived. Billions of people were alive who would have died otherwise. But they were alive in a galaxy that now knew the price of survival. That calculated death in percentages and made peace with monstrous mathematics. Maybe in another 50 years someone would look back and say it meant something. That the sacrifices weren't wasted. That becoming monsters to defeat monsters was the right choice. Or maybe they'd look back and realize they'd won the war but lost something more important. That survival without principle is just another form of death. Daeho didn't know. He was just tired. Tired of carrying the weight. Tired of remembering faces. Tired of being the monster everyone else needed him to be. The galaxy was dying, and the council knew it. Archon Velmora stood before the great assembly, her luminescent skin flickering with distress. Behind her, holographic displays showed the horror that had consumed 17 star systems in just 3 months. The Void Swarm had returned after 10,000 years of silence, and nothing could stop it. "We have lost 4 full battle fleets," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber. "Conventional weapons only slow them down. Our scientists estimate we have less than a year before the core worlds fall." The representatives from 17 alien civilizations sat in stunned silence. They had tried everything. Plasma weapons, quantum bombs, even temporal displacement fields. The swarm simply absorbed the attacks and kept coming. These creatures didn't fight like an army. They consumed like a plague, and old Luminari elders spoke up. "There is one option we have not considered. The Beacon of Champions." The chamber erupted in debate. The beacon was an ancient artifact, older than any of their civilizations. It was designed to call forth heroes from across the universe in times of desperate need, but it could only be used once per millennium, and the energy cost would drain their reserves dangerously low. "We have no choice," Velmora said finally. "Activate the beacon." 3 days later, the ritual was complete. The beacon's signal shot across the galaxy, seeking champions, noble warriors, beings of light who would save them. The council waited, hoping for legends to answer their call. What they got was Earth. The transmission that came back was brief and cold. Message received. Assistance authorized. Military deployment in progress. No noble speeches. No promises of honor. Just a confirmation that help was coming. The council's initial relief turned to confusion when they checked their database on Earth. The planet was listed as pre-interstellar, limited technology, fragmented political structure. These were primitives who had barely mastered fusion power. What could they possibly offer? The answer arrived 2 weeks later in the form of a matte black Corvette that seemed designed to avoid detection rather than inspire awe. It docked at the council's sanctuary station without ceremony. When the airlock opened, 6 humans emerged wearing tactical gear that looked brutal and efficient. The lead human was a man named Deho. He was average height for his species, with dark hair cut short and eyes that seemed to evaluate everything. He carried no ceremonial weapons, just practical firearms that the council's scanners identified as chemically propelled projectile weapons. Primitive, but the way he wore them suggested he knew exactly how to use them. "Colonel Deho, Earth Expeditionary Force," he said without preamble. "This is my team. Minji, Hyunwoo, Jion, Taejin, and Dr. Sohee. We're here about your infestation problem." Velmora felt a chill at the word infestation. Not war, not invasion. Infestation, like they were discussing insects, not an existential threat. "We were expecting heroes," she said carefully. Deho's expression didn't change. "You called the wrong species then. We're not heroes. We're soldiers. Point us at your problem, show us what you know, and we'll handle it." The briefing that followed disturbed the council representatives. Deho's team asked strange questions. They didn't want to know about the swarm's honor codes or rules of engagement. They wanted to know about anatomy, reproduction cycles, communication methods, and weaknesses. When shown footage of a swarm creature tearing through a battleship's hull, Taejin actually smiled. "That's a predator attack pattern," he said. "Same as Earth's big cats. It goes for the throat equivalent first, then works its way down. Efficient." Dr. Sohee was already making notes. "The way it moves suggests a hive mind coordination but individual hunter instincts. Interesting, we can work with this." "Work with it?" Velmora asked. "These creatures have destroyed entire worlds." Sohee looked at her with clinical detachment. "So have we. The difference is, we're still here." The next day, Deho made a request that shocked the council. He wanted to take his team on a reconnaissance mission to an infested system. The council had lost 3 fleets attempting the same thing. 6 humans wanted to do it with 1 small stealth ship. "It's suicide," a council military advisor protested. "It's reconnaissance," Deho corrected. "We need to see them up close." "Your footage is good, but it's all from retreating ships. We need Predator's eye view." Against all wisdom, the council agreed. What choice did they have? The team departed in a modified scout ship, and the council watched the live feed with growing dread. The humans didn't approach the swarm-held system like a military force. They drifted in slowly, using debris fields for cover. Their ship's power signature reduced to almost nothing. When they finally reached visual range of a swarm nest, Jian took over. She was the team's sniper, and she spent 6 hours just watching through her scope. Then she fired a single shot at a swarm creature. It wasn't a kill shot. The bullet hit the creature's limb equivalent. Pain response is immediate, she noted calmly. They feel it and they react. Good. That means fear is an option. Minji was mapping the nest structure, but not like a military tactician. She was looking at it like an engineer examining a building for demolition. Load-bearing sections here, here, and here. If we take out these points, the whole structure collapses inward. Hyunwoo was studying the swarm's movement patterns. They hunt in packs but respond to individual threats independently. We can exploit that. Separate them, divide their attention, pick them off. The council watched in fascinated horror as these humans methodically analyzed the swarm not as an unstoppable force, but as a problem to be solved. When the team collected physical samples by literally cutting pieces off living swarm creatures, several council observers had to leave the room. Why are they doing this? One representative whispered to Velmora. Why provoke the creatures? Because they're not afraid, Velmora realized. They're studying them. Like scientists study a disease before they cure it. When the team returned 72 hours later, they brought back detailed analysis, biological samples, and a proposal that made the council's blood run cold. Daeho laid it out simply. The swarm is a predator species with hive mind coordination. You've been trying to fight them like an army. Wrong approach. You don't fight a predator. You exterminate it, the word hung in the air. Exterminate, not defeat. Not repel, exterminate. We're not prepared for that kind of warfare, Velmora said quietly. Daeho's response was blunt. Then get prepared. Because that's the only warfare that works against something like this. The swarm doesn't take prisoners. It doesn't negotiate. It consumes. So we teach it that consuming us costs more than it gains. And how do we do that? Velmora asked. For the first time, Daeho smiled. It wasn't a comforting expression. You let us do what humans do best. We survive. And anything that threatens our survival learns why that's a bad idea. The council had called for heroes to save them. Instead, they got something far more dangerous. They got Earth's monsters. And deep down, Velmora suspected that might be exactly what they needed. The council gave Daeho access to everything. Every piece of data on the Void Swarm, every failed battle plan, every desperate strategy that had accomplished nothing. Dr. Sohee spent 3 days locked in a laboratory analyzing the biological samples they'd collected. When she emerged, her conclusions disturbed everyone. The swarm isn't mindless, she explained to the assembled council military commanders. It's actually quite intelligent. But it doesn't think like you do. It thinks like a natural predator. It seeks out the weak, tests defenses, and strikes where resistance is lowest. Your problem is you've been trying to predict it like a military strategist. You should have been thinking like a hunter. A council admiral bristled. We are experienced military leaders with thousands of years of combined, and that's why you're losing, Hyunwoo interrupted. He was younger than Daeho but spoke with absolute confidence. You fight with honor, with rules. The swarm doesn't care about your rules. It cares about eating. That's it, Daeho stepped forward. We need to run a field test. There's a swarm nest on the abandoned colony world of Kavros 5. We want to hit it. That nest contains an estimated 10,000 individual creatures, the Admiral said. We would need at least 3 battle groups to. We'll take our team. 6 people. The room fell silent. Finally, Velmora spoke. 6 humans against 10,000 swarm creatures. You're asking us to watch you die? No, Daeho said. We're asking you to watch us work. The council approved the mission, perhaps because they were curious, perhaps because they had nothing left to lose. The human team took a single dropship down to Kavros 5. The planet's surface was covered in the black organic structures the swarm built to house their nests. The team didn't announce their arrival. They landed 5 kilometers away and approached on foot through the ruins of what had once been a thriving alien city. Minji carried enough explosives to level a building. Jian had a rifle and enough ammunition for maybe 300 shots. Taejin had close-range weapons that looked savage and brutal. Dr. Sohee carried canisters of something she'd developed in the lab. Hyunwoo had tactical gear and electronics. Daeho had a simple sidearm and a knife. Against 10,000 creatures, it looked like suicide. The attack began at dawn. But it wasn't an attack in any way the council understood warfare. Minji went in first, alone, and planted charges at carefully calculated points around the nest structure. The swarm detected her immediately and swarmed. She retreated exactly according to plan, leading thousands of creatures into a narrow canyon. That's when Jiyeon opened fire. From a position a kilometer away, she fired precise shots. Not at the creatures chasing Minji, at the canyon walls. The bullets were incendiary, and the walls were rich in volatile minerals. The resulting explosion buried half the swarm force under tons of rock. Terrain is a weapon, Hyunwoo noted calmly as he watched from the command post. The council never thought to use it. The surviving swarm creatures were confused, their hive mind coordination disrupted by the sudden loss of so many members. That's when Taejin struck. He moved through the disorganized creatures like death itself, his weapons cutting through carapace and flesh. He wasn't fighting to win glory. He was exterminating, efficient and brutal. Dr. Sohee deployed her canisters next. The gas that spread through the nest wasn't poison in the traditional sense. It was a biological agent she'd engineered specifically for the swarm. It attacked their communication pheromones, making the hive mind turn on itself. The council observers watched in horror as swarm creatures began attacking each other, unable to distinguish friend from foe. "Is this legal?" one observer whispered. "It's effective," Velmora said quietly. She couldn't look away. Minji triggered her charges. The nest structure collapsed inward exactly as she'd calculated. Thousands more creatures were crushed. The survivors fled, but they ran straight into the kill zones Hyunwoo had prepared. Automated turrets, more explosives, and terrain traps took care of the rest. 72 hours after they'd landed, the team called for extraction. The swarm nest was gone. All 10,000 creatures were dead. The 6 humans had some injuries, but nothing serious. The council's military commanders demanded a full briefing. What they heard changed their understanding of warfare forever. "You used biological weapons," an admiral accused. "Yes," Sohee said without shame. "You deliberately caused them to suffer." "Yes, fear is a weapon. The swarm needs to learn that attacking humans means pain and death." "You showed no honor, no mercy." "Honor gets you killed," Deho interrupted. "Mercy means the enemy comes back stronger. You called us here to solve a problem. We solved it. If you wanted a different solution, you should have specified that before we started." The debate raged for hours. Some council members were appalled by the human methods. Others pointed out that 6 humans had accomplished what 3 full battle groups had failed to do. The swarm nest was destroyed. That was undeniable. Finally, a council military commander asked the question that everyone was thinking. "Can you teach our forces to fight like this?" Deho looked at Velmora. "Do you want us to?" She thought about her people, about their culture of honor and dignity, about everything they'd built over thousands of years. Then she thought about the swarm consuming all of it, leaving nothing behind. "Yes," she said. "Teach us." The training began immediately. Hyunwoo took command of the council's elite units. What he did to them would have been considered torture in any other context. He forced them to abandon every principle of honorable warfare they'd been taught. He made them practice ambushes, retreats, and dirty tricks. He taught them that the only rule in survival is that there are no rules. Your enemy doesn't care if you're honorable. He told a group of shocked alien soldiers, "Your enemy cares about eating you. When you understand that, you understand how to win." Many of the alien soldiers couldn't handle it. They resigned, unable to reconcile the tactics with their values. But others stayed. They learned. And slowly, the council's military began to change. Minji worked with the council's engineers. The weapons she designed horrified them, mines that didn't just explode but released biological agents. Drones programmed to hunt and kill without mercy. Fortifications designed not to defend honorably, but to channel enemies into slaughter zones. "This is monstrous," one engineer said, looking at her designs. "This is effective," Minji corrected. "You want to survive or you want to feel good about yourself? Choose one." Dr. Sohee's work was perhaps the most disturbing. In the quiet of the xenobiology lab, she created weapons that targeted the swarm's biology specifically. Viruses that corrupted their hive mind communication, toxins that caused agonizing pain before death, genetic weapons that turned their own reproduction against them. When the council's ethics committee protested, she met with them personally. "You have a choice," she said. "You can keep your ethics and die with honor, or you can survive by doing what's necessary. I'm a scientist. I deal in facts." The fact is, the swarm will kill you all unless you're willing to kill them first. Decide which matters more, the council decided. The vote was close, but they authorized the use of human tactics and weapons. It was, they told themselves, temporary, just until the crisis was over. Then they could return to being civilized. Deho knew better. He'd seen this before on Earth. When you teach someone to be a monster, they don't forget how. Even after the danger passes, the knowledge remains, but that was a problem for later. Right now, they had a war to win. The first major test came at the Kryn Nebula. The swarm launched a massive offensive, throwing millions of creatures at the Council's defensive lines. It was the moment of truth. Would the Council's forces use what the humans had taught them? They did, and the swarm had never faced anything like it before. The Kryn Nebula had been a place of beauty once. Ancient stars cast rainbow colors through clouds of cosmic dust. Now it was about to become a graveyard. The swarm came in a wave that blotted out the stars. Millions of creatures, ship-sized monsters and smaller hunter-killers, all moving with hive-mind coordination. The Council's fleet waited for them, but not in the traditional battle formation. They'd learned from the humans. This was an ambush. All units, hold position. Hyunwoo's voice came through the communication channels. He was aboard the command carrier, orchestrating the entire operation. Let them come deeper. Ignore the bait reflex, that was the hardest part. The Council forces wanted to charge forward, to meet the enemy in glorious combat. But Hyunwoo had drilled into them a simple truth. Glory gets you killed. Patience wins wars. The swarm pushed deeper into the nebula, chasing what looked like a fleeing Council fleet. They didn't know it was a deception until Minji's minds activated. Thousands of explosive devices detonated simultaneously, and the dense nebula gas turned into a firestorm. Swarm creatures burned by the hundreds, but that was just the opening move. Phase 2, Hyunwoo ordered. Spring the trap. The fleeing Council ship suddenly reversed course. Behind them, the rest of the fleet emerged from hiding in the nebula's densest regions. The swarm was surrounded, and now Dr. Sohi's biological weapons deployed. Canisters released clouds of engineered viruses into the swarm. The creatures' hive-mind communication broke down. They started attacking each other, confused and dying. The coordinated assault became chaos. Now the ground forces, Deho commanded. Shuttles dropped from the Council fleet, carrying soldiers trained in the human way of war. They hit the swarm's command nodes, the larger creatures that coordinated smaller units. These soldiers didn't fight fair. They used ambush tactics, explosives, biological weapons, and pure ruthless violence. The swarm had never encountered an enemy that fought like this. In 16 hours, it was over. The swarm lost 70% of its combat strength in the nebula. It was their first major defeat in this invasion cycle. But victory had a cost. 3 Council worlds had been sacrificed as bait to draw the swarm into the nebula. Their populations were evacuated, but the planets themselves were left defenseless. The swarm consumed them completely before moving to the trap. Billions of years of civilization, art, history, and culture were gone forever. Velamora stood in the command center, watching the casualty reports. Not military casualties. Those were acceptable, but entire worlds erased from existence because they were bait in a trap. Was it worth it? She asked Deho quietly. Does it matter? He replied. It's done, and you're alive because of it. We sacrificed our own people. You sacrificed 3 worlds to save 50. The math works. That doesn't make it feel better, but that's command. You make the choice that lets the most people survive, and then you live with it. Velamora looked at this human who spoke about sacrifice so casually. How many times have you made choices like this? Deho's expression didn't change. Enough that I stopped counting. The victory at Kryn Nebula changed the war. The Council forces had proven they could fight the swarm using human tactics, but it also changed the Council itself. The alien civilizations that had prided themselves on honor and dignity had become something else. Something that valued survival over principle. Not everyone accepted this. Protests erupted across the Council worlds. Citizens who had never seen the swarm up close didn't understand why such brutal methods were necessary. They called the military leaders monsters. They demanded a return to honorable warfare. Taejin found it amusing. They want you to fight nice, he told a group of Council officers. Let them try. Give them a rifle and drop them on a swarm world. See how long their honor lasts. But the swarm was adapting too. After the Kryn defeat, it changed its strategy. Instead of attacking military targets, it began hitting civilian populations. Refugee convoys, medical stations, undefended colonies, soft targets where the Council's military couldn't protect them. The first massacre happened on Orin 4, a refugee world housing millions who'd fled from swarm-occupied territories. The creatures came without warning, moving faster than the Council fleet could respond. By the time help arrived, everyone was dead. Hyunwoo analyzed the attack patterns. "They're trying to break your will to fight," he explained to the Council military commanders. "They can't beat your fleet directly anymore, so they're going after morale. Make you afraid, make you hesitate. So what do? A Council admiral asked. "We consolidate," Daeho said. He pulled up a star map. "Pull back from the outer colonies. Fortify the core worlds. Let the swarm overextend itself, chasing scattered targets while we build an impenetrable defensive line." The room erupted. "You're talking about abandoning 50 billion people," Velamora said. "I'm talking about saving 500 billion, Daeho replied coldly. "You can't defend everything. Spread your forces thin and you lose everything. Concentrate your strength and you hold what matters." It's not a nice choice. It's the only choice. The debate lasted for days. Some Council members wanted to defend every world, save every life. Others saw the brutal logic in Daeho's plan. In the end, survival won over sentiment. The order was given. The outer colonies would be evacuated where possible, abandoned where necessary. Millions of people fled toward the core worlds, but millions more were left behind in colonies too remote or too exposed. The swarm consumed them all. Ji-yeon watched it happen from the bridge of a scout ship. She'd volunteered for a deep reconnaissance mission into swarm territory, trying to find the breach point where the creatures first entered their dimension. The journey took her through systems that had once been populated, now silent and dead. "Why do we do this?" Her co-pilot, a young Council officer, asked one day. "What makes us better than them if we're willing to let people die?" Ji-yeon was quiet for a long moment. "We're not better. We're just more desperate to survive. The swarm kills because that's what it does. We kill because we want to live. Maybe that's not a big difference. Maybe it's the only difference that matters." She found the breach point 3 weeks later. It was a wound in space itself, a tear between dimensions through which the swarm poured into their universe. She recorded everything, took readings, and transmitted the data back to Dr. Sohee. The data was disturbing. The swarm wasn't random. It targeted civilizations that had reached a certain level of development. Advanced technology, complex culture, broad territorial expansion. Every species the swarm had consumed fit the profile. It was like the universe itself was rejecting advanced life, sending the swarm to clean up. "We're not fighting an enemy," Ji-yeon transmitted back. "We're fighting an immune response. The universe thinks we're a disease." Back in Council space, the defensive lines were holding, but Sergeant Taejin found himself on the fortress moon of Kavros, one of the key defensive positions protecting 2 core worlds. He had 2,000 Council soldiers under his command and 10,000 civilians in bunkers behind the lines. Then the swarm found them. They came in numbers that blocked out the sky. Millions of creatures throwing themselves at the fortress in waves. Taejin's forces used every dirty trick the humans had taught them. Mines, biological weapons, kill zones, tactical retreats, and ambushes. They held for 3 days. On the 4th day, Taejin knew they couldn't hold any longer. The swarm was too many. They would break through eventually. And when they did, 10,000 civilians would die. He made the call himself. He ordered all civilians evacuated on the last available transports. Then he sent most of his soldiers with them. He kept only volunteers, those who understood what he was about to do. Minji had installed a contingency protocol on every major defensive position. A last resort option. Taejin activated it now. The fortress moon had massive fusion reactors powering its shields. If they were destabilized in exactly the right way, the entire moon would explode. He sent one final transmission to Daeho. "Sir, it's been an honor. Tell the Council they wanted heroes. Heroes save people. We're monsters, and monsters kill things. Taejin out!" The moon exploded with the force of a small star. 3 swarm hive clusters were destroyed instantly. The approach vector to 2 core worlds was blocked by debris for months. The swarm offensive in that sector collapsed. Taejin and his volunteers died instantly. The Council mourned them as heroes. Daeho got drunk for the first time in years. He drank alone in his quarters, staring at Taejin's personnel file. Another soldier who'd done his job, Another piece of himself he'd sacrificed to keep others alive. Vilmora found him there. Was he a hero? She asked. No, Deho said. He was a soldier who made a choice. The math worked. We saved more people than we lost. That's all that matters in war. Then why are you drinking? Deho looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. Because I can do the math. That doesn't mean I have to like it. Jian's data changed everything. Dr. Sohi spent weeks analyzing the readings from the dimensional breach, running simulations and calculations that pushed council computers to their limits. Finally, she called a meeting with Deho and the council leadership. I have good news and bad news, she began. The good news is I think I can close the breach. Sort of? Sort of? Vilmora asked. I can't actually seal it, but I can invert it, turn it into a trap that will suck the swarm back into the void and collapse behind them. They'll be gone permanently. And the bad news? So he pulled up a simulation. It requires enormous energy to trigger, and the swarm has to be concentrated near the breach point when we activate it. We need bait, something big enough to draw their entire remaining force into one location. Deho studied the simulation. You're talking about using an entire populated system as bait. Yes. We evacuate as many people as possible, then rig the local star to go supernova. The swarm will rush in to consume the fleeing populations. When they're concentrated around the breach, we trigger the inversion. The explosion provides the energy. The swarm gets sucked back and we seal the breach. The room was silent. Finally, a council admiral spoke. You're asking us to sacrifice billions of people. I'm asking you to sacrifice some people to save everyone else, so he corrected. The math is simple. We can evacuate maybe 70% of the target system if we start now. 30% will be left behind. That's about 15 billion lives. But if we don't do this, the swarm eventually kills everyone. 500 billion lives. Which number is bigger? Vilmora felt sick. There has to be another way. Find it in the next 6 hours and I'll use it, Deho said. But this is what we have now. You want to survive? This is the cost. The council leadership debated through the night. Some argued for more time to find alternatives. Others pointed out that delay meant more people died to the swarm anyway. In the end, survival won. It always did. The target was the Orvax system, one of the council's most populated regions. 4 planets with billions of inhabitants, massive orbital stations, centuries of culture and history. And it was close enough to the breach point to work as bait. Minji coordinated the evacuation. Every ship in the council fleet was pressed into service. Military vessels, cargo haulers, private yachts, even old mining barges. Anything that could fly and carry people. They had 3 weeks to evacuate as many as possible. The operation was chaos. People panicked when they learned their system was being sacrificed. Some refused to leave their homes. Others fought for space on evacuation ships. Minji had to make brutal decisions about who got priority. Children first, then adults. The elderly and sick were left behind with medical care and apologies. I'm condemning billions to death, she said to Yunwoo one night. How do I live with that? You live with it by remembering you saved billions more, he replied. That's all command is. Making the choice that saves the most people, then carrying the weight of everyone you couldn't save. By the end of 3 weeks, they'd evacuated 72% of Orvax's population. The remaining 28% stayed behind, either by choice or because there simply wasn't room. 15 billion people waiting to die. Deho visited Orvax 3 during the final days. He walked through cities that were half empty, spoke with people who'd chosen to stay. An old luminary woman asked him why they had to die. Because the universe isn't fair, he told her honestly. Because the swarm has to be stopped and this is the only way we know how. I'm sorry. That's not enough, but it's all I have. She looked at him with sad, wise eyes. Will you remember us? Yes, Deho said. And he meant it. Another weight to carry, another price of command. The human team prepared the trap. Hyunwoo set up the supernova trigger in Orvax's star. It was remarkably simple technology. Destabilize the star's core, start a chain reaction, and step back. The star would go critical in exactly 48 hours after activation. Dr. Sohi positioned her dimensional inversion devices around the breach point. They would activate the moment the supernova's energy wave reached them, using that massive power surge to flip the breach inside out. Minji laid trap after trap throughout the system. Even if the main plan failed, she'd make the swarm pay for every meter they advanced. Mines, biological weapons, automated defense platforms. The Orvac system would be the swarm's graveyard one way or another. Jian took a small team and set up observation posts throughout the system. Her job was to monitor the swarm's approach and confirm when they were committed to the trap. It was dangerous work. If the swarm detected them too early, the whole plan collapsed. The final evacuation ships departed. The Orvac system fell silent except for those who'd stayed behind. 15 billion people, waiting in their homes and public spaces knowing death was coming. Then the swarm arrived. They came like locusts, drawn by the concentration of life in one place. Billions of creatures poured into the system, eager to feed. They didn't know it was a trap. They couldn't resist that much concentrated prey. They're committing, Jian reported. 90% of their remaining forces are in the system. 95%. 98%. They're all here. Activate the trigger, Deho ordered. Hyunwoo pressed the button. Deep in Orvax's star, the destabilization began. 48 hours until detonation. The swarm sensed something was wrong. Their hive mind intelligence recognized the trap at the last moment. They tried to retreat, but Minji's defenses blocked their escape routes. Mines exploded. Biological weapons created clouds of confusion. The automated platforms opened fire. The swarm panicked. They pushed toward the breach point, trying to escape back to the void. Exactly as planned. 47 hours, Hyunwoo reported. The battle raged across the Orvac system. The remaining Council military forces harassed the swarm, keeping them off balance, driving them toward the breach. They took heavy casualties but held their positions. Everyone knew what they were fighting for. This was the last battle. Win or die. Jian and her team were pinned down on Orvax 2, surrounded by swarm creatures. They fought from the ruins of an abandoned city, buying time for the evacuation fleet to get beyond the blast radius. She knew they wouldn't make it out. The math didn't work, but she kept fighting anyway. 30 hours. Hyunwoo stayed aboard the command ship, coordinating the final retreat. Other ships begged him to evacuate. He refused. Someone had to make sure the supernova triggered properly. Someone had to stay until the last possible moment to adjust the timing if needed. 20 hours. The swarm finally broke through Minji's defenses in several places. They spread through the system, consuming the last pockets of resistance. The 15 billion people who'd stayed behind died as the creatures swept over the planets. Quick for some, slower for others. All of them part of the price. 10 hours. Deho ordered the final retreat. All remaining ships were to jump to safe distance. The command fleet began pulling back. Hyunwoo checked and rechecked the supernova calculations. Everything was perfect. The star would explode exactly when needed. 5 hours. All ships, this is your last chance to evacuate, Hyunwoo transmitted. Most ships jumped away. A few stayed behind. Volunteers who wanted to witness the end. Or maybe they just couldn't live with abandoning their homes. 1 hour. The swarm sensed the danger now. They fled toward the breach point in a massive exodus, trying to escape. Dr. Sohee watched from a distant observation post as billions of creatures crowded around the dimensional tear. Perfect, she whispered. Just a little closer. 30 minutes. Hyunwoo made his final log entry. This is Lieutenant Hyunwoo, Earth Expeditionary Force. Supernova trigger is confirmed operational. All calculations verified. If you're watching this, the plan worked. If not, well, at least we tried. To anyone who follows, remember that sometimes the only way to win is to be willing to pay any price. 10 minutes. The last evacuation ships jumped away. Only Hyunwoo's command vessel remained, and a handful of volunteers who refused to leave. Jian and her team were dead, killed in the final swarm push. 15 billion civilians were gone, but the trap was ready. 1 minute. Hyunwoo watched the countdown. 30 seconds, 20, 10, 5. The star exploded. The energy wave expanded at light speed, consuming everything. Planets vaporized. Swarm creatures burned by the billions. The dimensional breach lit up like a portal to hell itself. Dr. Sohee activated the inversion devices. The breach twisted, reversed, became a massive gravitational whirlpool. The swarm, caught in the star's explosion and desperate to escape, poured through the breach. But it wasn't an escape route anymore. It was a one-way trip back to the void. Billions of swarm creatures were sucked backward through the breach, screaming in their alien way. The breach collapsed behind them, sealing shut with the energy of a supernova, and then silence. The swarm was gone. Every last creature pulled back into the void. The breach was sealed. The war was over. The cost was 15 billion lives, an entire star system, Hyunwoo, Jian, Taejin, and countless others. But the galaxy survived.